My name is Melissa Carter, and I'm a wife, a mom to 2 wonderful teenagers, and a community college art instructor in Pennsylvania. What I'm about to share with you is my near-death experience testimony of what happened when Jesus showed me the profound truth about the origins and responsibility of the white people. I truly saw and experienced something that completely changed my understanding of the white race, its heritage, and its role in the divine plan for humanity. But before we start, please let me know where you're listening from. It will be nice to feel closer, even if we're physically apart. Also, don't forget to like and comment on what you thought about this near-death experience testimony. Let's have a fair and open discussion so we can learn from each other on this channel. Enjoy listening. It happened on October 12, 2023. I was driving home after a long day at college, my mind already busy thinking about tomorrow's lesson plans and the usual worries about dinner and my kids' schedules. I was running behind schedule because I'd been late picking up my daughter from her dance rehearsal. I remember thinking how hectic life could get. Then, out of nowhere, everything went wrong. Rounding a sharp bend on a familiar road, my car hit a slick patch left by a sudden downpour. In one moment that seemed to stretch out forever, my car lost all grip and spun out of control. I heard the tires screech and metal grinding against metal. I remember my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. Then, in a flash of chaos and disbelief, everything went dark. Instead of the usual sensations of pain or panic, I found myself floating above the wreckage. I could see my crumpled car below me, all twisted and lying in a mess on the rain-soaked road. Strangely, there was no pain and no fear, only an overwhelming sense of calm. I felt like I was watching everything from the outside, like I had stepped back from my own life. It was surreal. I could see my body down there, motionless, as if I were observing someone else's life. Then I felt a pull, a gentle, steady force that began to draw me upward, away from that all-too-familiar world. I didn't feel afraid at all. Instead, I felt like I was being welcomed into something bigger, something that I had always secretly hoped for even without knowing it. As I floated upward, everything around me started to change. The dull, everyday colors of my world were replaced by a bright, steady light that wasn't harsh or blinding. Instead, it was warm and inviting. There was soft background noise, like a quiet hum or music that wasn't trying to be fancy or dramatic. It was just there, comforting and steady. I soon realized that I was no longer in a place I recognized. I wasn't in a hospital or any familiar building. I was in a space that I can only describe as otherworldly, an open area filled with light and a deep sense of peace. It felt like stepping into a quiet room after years of noisy chaos. I knew without a doubt that I was no longer among the living in the way I had always known. Before I had time to process it all, a presence appeared right in front of me. At first, it was just a soft glow that seemed to get brighter and then slowly took shape. I soon recognized the figure. There was no mistaking it. I was looking into the eyes of Jesus. His presence was calm, warm, and powerful at the same time. It was like being wrapped in a blanket that made you feel safe and important all at once. "Melissa," he said, "you're here because you're going to see a truth that has been hidden for a long time, a truth about the origins and destiny of a group of people that has been misunderstood for centuries." I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't form the words. I managed only to think, "Jesus, what do you mean? What's going on?" He smiled. "Melissa," he said again, "today you're going to learn something that very few have ever been shown. I'm going to reveal to you what really lies behind the story of those called white, the lineage that comes from Noah's son Japheth. This is not a story about superiority or dominance. It's a story about responsibility, about the gifts given to a people and how those gifts can either build up or tear down our world." Even then, I could feel my mind racing. I'd always heard about biblical genealogies and about Japheth in Sunday school, but I never thought that something so significant could be revealed to me in such a personal way. I wasn't expecting an explanation that would tie all those ancient names and histories to something that affected me and the world I knew. Jesus led me along a path that seemed to be made of light itself. We didn't walk in the way we do on earth, but I followed along as if I were moving through time. As we went, he began to explain in plain language what this all meant. "Melissa," he said, "long before the divisions you see today, humanity was united as one. The idea of race and the categories we now cling to were never meant to separate us. One of the key branches of that original human family comes from Japheth. This branch has been associated with what people call white. But the story isn't one of superiority. Instead, it's a story of a special kind of responsibility. He went on to say that the people who descended from Japheth were blessed with traits like creativity, reason, and an ability to build great civilizations. I saw images in my mind's eye of ancient people working together, artists painting on stone walls, scholars debating under open skies, and architects planning great cities. These images were not just pretty pictures, they were a record of what this lineage was capable of when it used its gifts for the common good. Japheth's descendants, Jesus explained, have made many contributions to art, philosophy, science, and governance. But the gift of creativity and intelligence is not simply a ticket to power or wealth. It is a tool given by God so that humanity can grow together in understanding and love. Unfortunately, over time, some of that great potential was lost to pride, and instead of uniting people, it often served to divide them. I listened carefully as he continued. Melissa, what I am revealing to you is not meant to create more division. On the contrary, it's a wake-up call, a reminder that every gift, every talent, comes with the responsibility to use it wisely. The legacy of these peoples is meant to be a light that brings all of humanity together, not a weapon to set one group apart from another. At that moment, I realized that everything I'd heard about history in school, everything that had been passed down by family and community, was only a small part of a much larger story. Jesus was showing me that behind the historical narrative lay a divine plan, a plan in which every person, regardless of background, had a role to play. It was as if the real story was being rewritten in front of my eyes, one that called for unity rather than division. I remember asking, Jesus, if all people are part of one family, why do so many seem to fight over differences? Why has pride taken over so much of our history? He looked at me with a seriousness that made my heart pound. Melissa, humans were given free will. With that freedom comes the possibility to choose wisely or to stray. The gifts that come with intellect and creativity can be used to build bridges or to erect barriers. Over the centuries, many have chosen to let pride and greed overshadow the true purpose of those gifts. But the message I give you is that it's not too late to turn things around. Recognize that every person is a child of God, and use your gifts to serve, not to divide. I nodded slowly, trying to absorb every word. The conversation wasn't abstract or filled with lofty language. It was straightforward, honest, and practical. Jesus spoke to me like a friend who cared deeply about how we treated one another. He didn't offer an endless sermon. Instead, he offered clear advice. Use your gifts, no matter how great or small, to help lift up those around you. Jesus then began to take me on a tour through history, showing me how the descendants of Japheth had shaped the world. We moved through scenes that looked like snapshots from different eras. I saw ancient cities bustling with life and people engaged in creative pursuits. There were images of great thinkers discussing ideas that had the power to change lives, and of artists whose work inspired entire generations. He explained, Melissa, many of the great civilizations in history owe their progress to the contributions of those who descended from Japheth. Think of the philosophers in ancient Greece, the builders of Rome, and the inventors of the Renaissance. These were people who used their talents to make the world a better place. But sometimes, the same talents were twisted by selfish ambition, leading to conflict instead of collaboration. I could see in my mind how history might have been different if people had remembered their true purpose. Instead of using creativity and intellect to uplift one another, too often those gifts were used to dominate or exclude. Jesus was clear. The true legacy of these peoples was meant to be one of responsibility and service. It wasn't about claiming superiority, it was about recognizing a duty to all of humanity. He continued, the gifts of intellect, art, and leadership are not meant to be hoarded. They're given so that you can share with others, so that everyone has a chance to shine. When people use their talents only for personal gain, they stray from the path I laid out at the beginning. I want you, Melissa, to remember that these gifts are sacred. They are tools to build a better world. I listened as he recounted specific examples from the Bible and from history. I remembered stories from the Old Testament, stories of how God chose leaders not because they were the strongest or the most intelligent, but because they were willing to serve. I recalled how Moses led his people by trusting in God, and how David, despite his humble beginnings, became a king by following the path of righteousness. These weren't just historical tales, they were lessons about how power and responsibility go hand in hand. Melissa, Jesus said, your own story, your own journey, is part of this divine plan. You might not see yourself as extraordinary right now, but I've chosen you to witness this truth because you have a role to play in healing a broken world. It's not about race or heritage, it's about how you use the gifts you've been given. Whether you're an artist, a teacher, or a parent, you have the power to make a difference. And that difference starts with understanding your own worth as a child of God. At that point, I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I was overwhelmed by the responsibility of it all. On the other, I was filled with hope. I had always thought that the history I learned in school was complete, but now I understood that there was so much more behind those stories. It was as if I'd been given a backstage pass to the real workings of history, a glimpse at the divine plan that had been unfolding for centuries. Now, let me be clear. What Jesus revealed to me about the white people is meant to bring hope and responsibility. He explained that the narrative many people cling to, that white people are somehow inherently superior, is not supported by the divine truth. Instead, he said that the gifts and responsibilities given to this lineage are meant to serve as a warning and an inspiration. Melissa, he said, the idea that any one group is meant to rule over others is a distortion of my plan. The legacy of those you call white, descending from Japheth, is not a certificate of superiority. It is a call to recognize a duty, to use the talents and the resources entrusted to you for the good of all. What shocks you, and what might shock others when you share this, is that the true story is one of burden and responsibility. It's a wake-up call to let go of pride and to embrace the idea that every human being has value. I remember feeling a jolt in my heart when he said that. I'd grown up in a culture where history was often taught in a way that celebrated certain achievements without acknowledging the cost or the responsibility that came with them. Jesus' words cut through that narrative. They were blunt, honest, and yes, shocking. They forced me to confront the possibility that the way people talk about history and race is flawed, that the idea of superiority is a lie that has been accepted for too long. He went on, every gift has its dark side. The same creativity that built beautiful works of art can also be used to divide. The intelligence that can solve problems can also be used to create conflict. The shock of this revelation is meant to wake you up, to make you see that the power you hold, whether as an individual or as a group, comes with a heavy responsibility. It's not enough to be proud of your heritage. You must also be ready to share it, to use it to bridge divides and to serve others. I sat there, absorbing every word as if it were a lifeline. The conversation was raw and real, filled with the kind of honesty you rarely encounter. It wasn't sugar-coated or meant to make me feel good about myself. It was meant to challenge me, to force me to re-examine everything I thought I knew about identity and responsibility. Jesus also made it clear that the destiny of the lineage associated with white people was not predetermined by the color of their skin or the borders on a map. Melissa, he said, the divine plan doesn't recognize the petty divisions of this world. The true measure of a person is found in the heart and in the actions taken to help others. What I reveal to you is that the legacy of Japheth is not a tool for building walls between people, but a means to break them down. It's a call to unity, and that is what will truly shock you when you see how much potential there is for healing and growth. I could hardly believe it. Everything I'd heard about history and identity was being turned on its head at that moment. I realized that what had always been presented as a natural order was, in fact, something that could be reshaped by choice. The responsibility was enormous, but so was the potential for good. Jesus continued to show me scenes from history, a montage of moments where people used their talents for both good and ill. I saw flashes of brilliant artists, compassionate leaders, and wise thinkers, alongside images of conflict and separation. Through it all, he stressed that the shock wasn't meant to create resentment, but to inspire action. Melissa, let this revelation be a turning point. Use this knowledge to question what has been accepted as truth for too long. Let it drive you to seek a future where every person is valued, and where the gifts you possess are used to help rather than harm. I listened, heart pounding, as the truth sank in. It was a message that was as simple as it was profound. No group is inherently superior, and every gift comes with a responsibility to serve others. That idea might sound straightforward, but it's one that can shake the very foundation of how people see themselves and each other. The conversation with Jesus was long, stretching on for what felt like hours, though time itself seemed irrelevant in that place. Every minute was filled with insights that challenged everything I had ever taken for granted. I was shown that the history of human achievement, especially as it related to the white race, was not a story of innate superiority but of burden and potential. The shock of this revelation was not meant to incite anger or division, but to awaken a deeper sense of duty in everyone who hears it. Then Jesus stressed repeatedly that the true value of any heritage lies in what you do with it. "Melissa," he said, "it's not enough to be proud of your ancestry. True greatness is measured by how you use your gifts to make the world a better place. The history of the descendants of Japheth should inspire you to be better, to use your intellect, your creativity, and your resources to serve all people." I found myself thinking back on my own life, my work as an art instructor, the time I spend with my kids, the little acts of kindness I often take for granted. It became clear to me that these everyday actions were part of the same divine plan. Every time I helped a student express themselves through art or took the time to listen to a friend in need, I was fulfilling a piece of that larger responsibility. Jesus didn't offer grand solutions or vague promises. He spoke in plain, simple terms about the importance of action. "Melissa, change starts with you," he said. "It starts with recognizing that every person is important, and that every act of compassion contributes to a greater good. The legacy I've revealed to you today is meant to shock, yes, but also to empower. It's a call to look at the world differently, to see past the labels and recognize the divine potential in every soul." I realized then that this message was not just for me, it was for everyone. It was a wake-up call to challenge the narratives that had been accepted for so long, to push back against the idea that any one group is somehow above or separate from the rest of humanity. The revelation was meant to be shared, not as a means to create division, but as a way to bring people together. Jesus made it clear that the future is unwritten. "Melissa, the choices you make from here on out will shape not only your life but the lives of many others. Embrace your heritage, not as a source of pride, but as a call to action. Use your talents, your wisdom, and your compassion to break down the barriers that separate us. That is the true meaning of what I've revealed to you." The simplicity of his words struck me deeply. It wasn't about grand gestures or heroic acts, it was about everyday choices. It was about being kind, thoughtful, and responsible. It was about realizing that every decision, no matter how small, contributes to the larger picture of our shared humanity. I left that part of the conversation with a sense of purpose that I'd never experienced before. The shock of the revelation had given way to a clear understanding of my role in this world, a role that involved using my gifts to help others, to bridge divides, and to foster unity wherever I could. Throughout the long, immersive dialogue with Jesus, we touched on many aspects of history, spirituality, and everyday life. He recounted lessons from the Bible that had always stayed with me, stories of figures like Moses and David, who despite their flaws, were chosen because of their willingness to serve. I recalled how Jesus himself had taught that the greatest among us must be the servant of all, and how that principle was the very foundation of the message I was now receiving. "Melissa," he said, "every challenge you face, every setback, is an opportunity to live out this truth. Don't let pride blind you to the needs of others. Use your knowledge, your creativity, and your compassion to help those around you. In doing so, you fulfill the true legacy of your heritage." That message resonated with me on a deeply personal level. I began to think about all the times I'd been frustrated by the divisions I saw in the world, whether in my community, at work, or even within my own family. I realized that in many ways, these divisions were the result of people forgetting the basic truth that Jesus was trying to teach me right then, that every person is part of a single divine family, and that the gifts each person carries are meant to be shared. I can't say that the revelations erased all my doubts or that everything became simple overnight. But they did change how I saw the world. I started to notice small moments of unity, neighbors helping each other out, co-workers putting aside differences to solve problems, strangers showing kindness without expecting anything in return. These were the moments that, in their own quiet way, affirmed the truth I had been shown. Jesus' words about responsibility weren't just historical or philosophical, they were very practical. "Melissa," he said, "remember that the legacy of your heritage isn't written in stone. It's a living, breathing thing that you help to shape every day. Whether you're in the classroom, at home, or out in your community, you have the power to influence the world around you. Let that power be used to lift others up, not to tear them down. I took that to heart. Every day since that encounter, I've tried to live by that simple rule: use my gifts for the good of others. It isn't always easy, and I still struggle with doubts and frustrations, but the memory of that conversation keeps me focused on what really matters. I spent what felt like hours in that realm of light and truth with Jesus. Every moment was filled with insights about the ancient origins of the lineage known as white, not as a symbol of superiority, but as a call to take on a sacred responsibility. I was shown how this lineage had the potential to unite or divide, depending on how its gifts were used. The shock of the revelation wasn't meant to make anyone feel bad about who they were. It was meant to serve as a reminder that with every gift comes a duty to serve others. Jesus kept emphasizing that the power of creativity, intellect, and leadership isn't something to be hoarded or used for personal gain. Instead, it should be shared generously, with humility and care. Melissa, he said, know that the truth I've revealed to you is a call to action. It's a call to build bridges, to help those in need, and to show the world that the true measure of greatness is not in what you have, but in what you give. That was the heart of the conversation, and it shocked me because it went against so many of the ideas I'd grown up with. I realized that what I'd always thought of as a marker of identity was actually a challenge. The history I had learned in school was incomplete without the understanding of this responsibility. It wasn't about being proud for the sake of pride. It was about recognizing that every person, regardless of their heritage, has a role to play in creating a better future. By the time our conversation began to draw to a close, I was filled with a sense of clarity. I wasn't just a witness to this divine revelation, I was now a part of it. I had been given insights that I knew would change the way I lived my life, the way I saw my community, and the way I understood history itself. And even though I didn't want the experience to end, I knew I had to return to the world of the living. After what felt like a long, meaningful journey in that extraordinary realm, I began to sense a gentle pull, a call to come back. I slowly felt the shift from that timeless space back to the reality I'd known. I opened my eyes in a hospital room, surrounded by concerned faces and the steady beep of monitors. The physical pain was there, a reminder that I had indeed been in a terrible accident, but it was now secondary to the overwhelming sense of purpose I had carried with me from that divine conversation. In the days that followed, I spent a lot of time in the hospital recovering, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. Every time I closed my eyes, I remembered Jesus' words. They weren't just distant memories, they were practical guides for how to live a better life. I knew I had to share what I'd been shown, but I also realized that the real work was only just beginning. In sharing my story, I hope to encourage others to question what they've been taught and to seek the deeper truths behind our history and our relationships. I'm not asking for blind acceptance of everything I experienced. I know it sounds hard to believe, but I am living proof that a single moment, a single revelation, can change the course of a life. And more than that, it can open the door to a better way of understanding who we are and what we're meant to do in this world. I share this testimony not to spark controversy or to divide people further, but to offer a new way of looking at things, a reminder that the gifts we all have are meant to be shared, that our history is rich with lessons of both triumph and failure, and that the true measure of a person is in how they use those gifts to help others. What Jesus revealed to me about the white lineage was not a tool for elevating one group over another. It was a call to recognize that with great talent comes great responsibility, a responsibility to build bridges, to foster understanding, and to work for the common good. The road ahead won't be easy. There will always be those who cling to outdated ideas of superiority and division. But I believe that if even a few people can embrace the responsibility of using their gifts to serve others, then we can slowly begin to heal the wounds that have kept us apart for far too long. We all have a part to play in this world, and together, we can create a future built on understanding, compassion, and unity.